In a sleepy village on the edge of nowhere stood a house that everyone avoided. Its shutters were crooked, its roof a patchwork of missing tiles, and its garden was nothing more than a tangle of weeds clawing at the cracked windows. To the villagers, it was a place best left forgotten, a relic of misfortune long past. But for a nimble and curious feline named Laila, this house wasn't a place to avoid. It was a challenge. You see, Laila wasn't an ordinary cat. Most cats stalk shadows out of instinct. Laila pursued the unknown with courage unmatched. She lived beneath the old cedar tree near the edge of the village, but she roamed far and wide, her amber eyes scanning the world for mysteries to unravel and lives to save. Few knew of her daring adventures, but those who did spoke of her with hushed admiration. One breezy afternoon, under the fading light of a golden sun, Laila's sharp ears caught a sound that froze her mid-step. It was faint, a tiny cry, like the muffled chirp of a bird, but strained, desperate. She tilted her head, her triangular ears twitching as she tried to locate the direction of the sound. It was coming from the old, abandoned house. Allowing herself a cautious sniff of the damp wind, Laila padded closer to the broken gate, her tail swishing low. The bird's cries pulled at something inside her, not just curiosity, but an aching need to help. Her petite claws gripped the uneven wooden slats of the fence as she peeked through the gaps. She could see no movement within, no hint of life, but the cries grew louder, more urgent. The brave cat leapt over the gate, landing silently among the thickets of wild grass that had overtaken the yard. She moved with purpose but caution, her paws brushing aside tufts of weeds without a sound. The house loomed closer, its presence cold and foreboding. The once proud front door hung slightly ajar, creaking as the evening breeze brushed against it. Laila narrowed her eyes, preparing herself for what awaited. Inside, the air was thick with dampness and the scent of rot. Furniture lay in crumbled heaps, carpets were worn thin, and cobwebs draped the corners like ghostly veils. But Laila wasn't focused on the decay. She was listening. Her ears swiveled as she followed the sound through the faded hallway, stepping over shattered glass and weaving around toppled lamps. The bird's cries were louder now, but tinged with exhaustion. And then she saw it. In the far end of the living room, beneath a window covered in dust, sat an ancient iron birdcage. Its bars were rusted, bent in some places, and utterly unyielding in others. Inside was a tiny sparrow, its feathers dusty and ruffled, its fragile wings trembling with fear. It flapped weakly, trying to move, but the cage, cruel and confining, held firm. The poor creature had been trapped for who knows how long, hungry, frightened, and alone. Laila stepped closer, her movements deliberate but unthreatening. The sparrow, seeing the cat, chirped wildly, flinging itself against the bars in panic. But Laila didn't flinch. She sat still, her tail curling elegantly around her paws as her amber gaze softened. She let out a low, comforting purr. It wasn't a signal of dominance, it was reassurance. She was here to help. The sparrow hesitated, its frantic movements slowing as it cautiously regarded its feline visitor. Laila placed a paw gently against the base of the stand, observing the cage's structure. Her sharp eyes took in every detail. The latch was corroded but closed tight, and the hinges were barely holding the door in place. It would take precision and strength to open it. For most creatures, it would be impossible. But not for Laila. The determined cat rose onto her hind legs, balancing effortlessly as her front paws reached for the latch. Her claws extended, glinting faintly in the dim light. With careful movements, she began to fiddle with the rusty mechanism, her head tilting to get a better look. She twisted the latch this way and that, her claws scraping against the metal in delicate strokes. It was tedious work. The latch wouldn't budge easily, and the rust made it even harder. But Laila wasn't one to give up. Minutes stretched like hours as she worked, the sparrow watching her every move with bated breath. Her claws dug deeper, pressing, pulling, clicking. And then, finally, a soft clunk. The latch slipped free, its corroded clasp surrendering under her persistence. The cage door creaked open, its hinges screaming with disuse. The sparrow remained frozen for a moment, uncertain of the freedom now within its grasp. Laila stepped back, lowering herself to the floor, and gave a soft, encouraging meow. Slowly, timidly, the sparrow hopped forward, its tiny eyes darting between Laila and the open door. With a flutter of wings, the sparrow emerged, its movements wobbly at first, but strengthening by the second. It chirped at Laila, not a cry of fear this time, but of gratitude. Laila approached the window, her paw resting lightly on the sill as she gazed at the sparrow. For a moment, the two shared an unspoken bond, a fleeting connection, born of bravery and trust. Then, with a final rustle of feathers, the sparrow took flight, disappearing into the open sky beyond the cracked glass. Laila lingered for a moment, watching the bird vanish into the horizon. The room felt lighter now, as if the act of rescuing the sparrow had lifted some of the house's heavy, suffocating gloom. The brave cat wandered back through the faded halls, her steps quieter than before, her heart lighter. As she emerged into the yard, the wind greeted her, carrying the scent of distant flowers and fresh grass. The old house loomed behind her, its shadows still deep and imposing, but to Laila, it no longer felt like a haunted place. It was a place where courage had triumphed, where compassion had shone through the dark. And as she padded back toward her tree, her tail held high, Laila knew she wouldn't stop roaming, wouldn't stop exploring. There would always be another mystery, another soul in need, another adventure waiting to be discovered. The village may not know her name, but to those she saved, Laila was a hero, a silent guardian whose bravery knew no bounds.